All right, we'll get going then. Welcome everybody. On behalf of the entire Hills Valley Coalition leadership team, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's presentation, Letting Go, an evening dedicated to releasing the need for perfectionism and learning healthier coping strategies for you and your family. Our keynote speaker this evening is Marcy Hopkins. Marcy is an award-winning host and the creative executive producer of Wake Up with Marcy, a TV talk show of inspiration and hope on WLNY TV, 10:55 Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. That's a plug. In addition to a recovery and mindset expert on major broadcast stations such as Fox, ABC, NBC, and CBS, she is also the author of an Amazon bestseller, Chaos to Clarity, Seeing the Signs and Breaking the Cycles. After Marcy speaks, she will lead an in-depth Q&A with Tanvi Matthew. Tanvi has worked in mental health for 20 years. 14 of those years were dedicated to working with adolescents and families in an intense hospital-based setting. She opened her private practice in 2014, and she currently focuses her work on helping individuals create a better work-life balance and a healthier relationship with themselves and their families. At the end, we will open the evening up to questions from the audience. Thank you for attending tonight and supporting the Hills Valley Coalition and our mission to create a stigma-free community. Now, please help me give a warm welcome to Marcy Hopkins.
Thank you. Thank you all so much for having me and allowing me to spend a little bit of this evening with you. Letting go of perfectionism, right? That's a hard thing to do. We cope in a lot of negative ways, but I want to help you find ways to cope in more positive ways. Because when we deal with stress and anxiety, it is very hard to move towards those positive ways of coping. So perfectionism, it's stagnation, right? We learn most through our mistakes. And when we are trying to be perfect, we can't move forward. We can't evolve. We don't have compassion for ourselves or for others. We are rigid and unfair. And that is to ourselves and to others. I love this quote by Maria Shriver: perfectionism doesn't make you feel perfect, it makes you feel inadequate, right? Less than. So I want to tell a little bit about my story and how perfectionism became a huge part for my life and the way that I coped with life. So when I was 6 years old, I was physically abused by my mom's boyfriend. I was given a choice to move in with my grandparents or stay with my mother. I chose to live with my grandparents because I didn't feel safe. But here I am, a 6-year-old, having to make these huge adult decisions, right? Now, I was happy that I was able to go with my grandparents because it was much more stable than with my mother. I was there from 6 to 12, but my grandfather drank a lot and he had a very explosive temper. So I lived in a lot of fear. I had abandonment because my mother and my father were not with me. So I dealt with this by having a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. I had no self-worth. I really didn't think that I was worth anything. But I also learned that you explode when you're not happy or something isn't right. And we never talked about anything. We would just sweep it under the rug. And that's what I learned. Because this is what happens when we do this to our children, or what we've learned, we mimic the behaviors of our parents. And so when I was 12 years old, my mother met this man, and I thought he was now going to be our knight in shining armor. It was going to be the life that I always wanted, right? Mother, dad, it was going to be this perfect life. They got married at my grandparents'. I was 12 years old, and it was the first time I got drunk. And I didn't get in trouble. I was put to bed. I woke up the next day, and I just went on. And I know it seems crazy. If my daughter ever did this, I think I would faint. I would just die. But everyone around me drank. I mean, even when I was 8 years old, my mother would give me a sip of a drink if I had a stomach ache to try to help me go to the bathroom. I couldn't sleep at her boyfriend's house because I didn't feel safe. And she was giving me like half a sleeping pill. I think I was like 9 years old. All right, so I was learning that drinking and drugs were your answer to any problem. So it was very difficult for me to make a positive decision, right? And it didn't seem like it was wrong. When my mother met Richard, like I said, I thought it was going to be amazing. But the thing that happened to me is sexual abuse started about 6 months into their relationship. My mom didn't leave. I ended up telling her about it. I didn't want to live. I felt that there was no way out. I was failing in school. I was being grounded. I had to stay in a place I didn't feel safe. So I started drinking even more because this is how I was coping. I became promiscuous because I thought if I gave things to boys, gave of myself, they would like me. And I had to drink to actually, be part of these behaviors, and it just perpetuated the problem. So fast forward, I got through high school, went to college. Somehow I made it in life, but it was that perfectionism that was growing inside of me. Because once I left home, I had decided that I was going to make the life for myself that I never had. I built walls around my heart and around myself. And I expected so much of myself and from others, right? So I had to look perfect on the outside. That started at a very young age. And then as I got older, I had no compassion for anyone else. I didn't even have compassion for myself. I just knew that I was going to make it, and I was going to make it any way that I possibly could. And anyone that got in my way, I was going to stomp all over you. And I became a manager not too many years into my work. And I didn't know how to be a manager, but I knew how to rage. If you made a mistake, it made me angry, and I didn't know how to handle it, all right? But I did ultimately become the director of on-air promotions at FX Network in LA, rose the ranks in work, everything looked good. I met my husband, and life was good. I thought that now I'm gonna have a great life. But the reality is, I was still drinking. I still drank every single day because to me that was normal. That's what I always saw. So 5 o'clock, I'd get together with the other moms. We'd pour our wine, or dinner time, I'd pour my wine, and that was just the norm. I also, like many of us, I bet you could all raise your hand how many hats that you wear, right? So a mom, a wife. When I left work, we moved to New Jersey. I had to now be a part of a new community. I was making friends. I was trying to volunteer as much as I could, get involved with the community, volunteering at school. I was trying to do everything. My plate was full, and I had to make sure that life always looked perfect for my husband and for myself and for everyone that saw us. But the reality is things for me were completely deteriorating, and things were not great behind closed doors. I then decided at about 40 years old that I was gonna get in front of the camera. I decided I was gonna go after a dream that I'd had since I was about 16, and I decided to go after commercial print modeling. So now I had to go into the city, I had to go for schooling for that, I had to be available for auditions, for gigs, and this took up a lot of my time, but I didn't want anyone else raising my children. So now I'm having to try to balance all of this. But what happened is when I got in front of the camera, I had no self-esteem. I had no self-love. I wasn't able to do what I needed to do to make it in that industry because I took it all on myself and thought there was something wrong with me. So what did I do? I started drinking. That became my liquid courage. I would fill up a water bottle with wine, and that's how I got through it. I wasn't able to create boundaries. I wasn't able to say no. I wasn't taking care of myself, and literally everything was deteriorating, and I was losing myself. So because I was drinking, I was drinking in the day, I was drinking in the evening, trying to keep it all afloat. I mean, when you're a perfectionist, you're trying to keep it afloat, and even if things are falling apart, you're trying to keep it afloat and still make it look perfect. But all the while, everything was falling apart. And I truly had built my life on an unstable foundation, right? Everything looked good, but it was basically built on quicksand. And everything came tumbling down. I was losing my health, my mental health, my spirituality. I lived in anger. I was pushing my family away. I had resentment. I lived in a victim mentality. I was blaming everyone else because I didn't do anything wrong. Everything was being done to me. Then October 3rd, 2015 was the last day I drank. I had a gig, I had my wine, and I ended up going out afterwards, and I was having drinks with my girlfriend, and I wasn't eating a lot at the time because I was trying to keep my figure, but I was drinking my calories. So the bottom line is I got behind the wheel of a car in a blackout. I didn't even realize that I did it. And I ended up getting a DUI. Now, that night, I went to bed in anger, in fear. If my husband didn't do what he did, or if he was around more, if my life wasn't the way it was, if I had more help, it was everybody else's fault. But what happened the next day, October 4th, 2015, is I woke up and my prayers had been answered. A miracle happened. And I realized I needed help. And what I did was first admitted to myself that I was an alcoholic, and I went downstairs. I sat down on that couch and I told my husband that I needed help, that I'm an alcoholic. And what he did was embraced me, and it was the first time I felt love. And all the while I had it right in front of me, but I had so many walls that I had built up I didn't even know. And I truly felt like the weight of the world came off my shoulders. And when I let go of the perfectionism and I started laughing and being lighter about life, asking for help, learning, evolving, getting to know who I am, what makes me happy, then all of these beautiful things started happening in my life. And that's what I want to help each of you do today. I want you to fill your toolbox with positive ways of coping. So perfectionism, I talked a lot about that, how it affected me, but I want you to know what it really is. Perfectionism is not really just striving for excellence, right? But it's having these unrealistic ideas of how you are supposed to show up and what you are supposed to do in this world. And we are putting this on ourselves. Nobody else is. And nobody else even knows if what you're doing is right or wrong, because you're the one who has the idea of what's supposed to be perfect for yourself. And it's very difficult to live up to these standards. When we strive for perfection, we're always judging ourselves, our accomplishments, and the way that we look. So expectations of perfectionism is truly toxic. It's toxic for you, and it's toxic for everyone around you. You focus on the fear. And a lot of times what happens, and most times, you don't ever start because you are so afraid and get yourself so overwhelmed, you never even start. The outcome is usually negative because you've already judged yourself, you've already expected so much of yourself, and you've already failed before it's even happened. And you don't believe in unconditional love, that someone could love you just for who you are. It's for how you perform, what you do, what you give to someone else. And it's also about needing the validation from others to make you feel good about yourself. So I want to ask you, just in this moment, if you could just imagine letting go. letting that all go and surrendering and turning it over, asking for help, and realizing you can't do it all yourself. Because when we let go of perfectionism and we ask for help, we live in a place of peace, in joy, in happiness. And it's not giving up, all right? That's when we lose hope and we feel defeated. So I was going to talk a little bit about myself, but Jennifer was so great and introduced me. I'm a talk show host. All of these things happened for me because of my sobriety, my healing journey, the way that I rewired my brain, the way that I think. I changed everything about myself. And then the miracles and the magic began to happen in my life. I broke generational cycles. I started seeing signs from the other side. I was being guided, and it was through the practices that I had learned through the 12-step program. So the fear behind perfectionism, right? When you measure your worth by what you've accomplished and what others say, right? That's that validation again. And no matter how much you improve, you're never going to be happy with the outcome, because you're always going to feel like a failure because you never feel like you're enough. And this comes from low self-esteem and needing that validation. So I want to ask you something. Where would perfectionism come from if you asked yourself, right? Maybe you really only know this answer. For me, I used perfectionism because I could only control what was on the outside, and because of my family situation. But if our parents are expecting perfectionism from us, or they are, comparing us to someone else, or we only get praise if we do well, or maybe they're saying something about how we looked when we were little. I mean, this is shaping us. And this is how we have this perfectionism mindset, where it stems from. And then the idea is, are we doing this to our kids, right? Because your parents probably got it from their grandparents, and now we're putting it on our kids. Also has a lot to do with where we live, but we'll talk more about that later. The narrative in our head is so powerful. I mean, how many of us talk to ourselves negatively? Do we have a lot of people that say things negatively in our head, that we're never good enough, or we're never gonna, do well in this area or that area, and we're just always belittling ourselves and tearing ourselves down? So, I mean, as you can see here, every mistake is proof that what you should be, right? After all the hard work that you've done, you're still not good enough. And these are things that you keep saying to yourself. What's wrong with me? I'm so stupid. That's what I always said to myself. I literally thought I was the stupidest person in the room, no matter what I did. And it was petrifying, because I was just stagnant, because I thought I was always being judged and so stupid. So what I want to encourage you to do is start thinking about the progress, right? The little things that you are doing. I bet you there are 3 things that you could say today that you did that you're proud of, but you're not thinking about them. So we have to make a conscious decision to think about these things, that we showed up for somebody, right? You even making a meal and being there for your kids, getting them where they need to go. These are all major accomplishments. And we need to pat ourselves on the back for these things. And I also want to encourage you to start doing things for yourself, so you start feeling like you're evolving. Self-care is so important. When we talk about, I love it on the airplane, put on your oxygen mask before someone else's. It's so true, right? Because we can't take care of anyone if we're not taking care of ourselves. So talking about these things that we're proud of, making this a daily practice. It's so important that you forgive yourself, right? Forgiveness is so important. And stop holding yourself to this high standard. So make a list of those things you're proud of, write down 3 things that you like about yourself, or just say them in the mirror every single morning. Look at yourself and say something that you like about yourself. Affirmations. These are so powerful. We say these negative things about ourselves. How about we switch that and start saying positive things? I've written down many. I am strong, I am inquisitive, I am capable, I am trustworthy, I am worthy, I am smart, kind, beautiful, whatever it is that makes you feel good about yourself, that's what you need to start saying. And it's gonna take a while. These are things that we really need to do every day to help ourselves to make this a daily practice. So I just want to talk about some of the stresses and anxiety for teens. I mean, my God, look at this list, right? I don't think we really even think about all of the different stressors that our kids have and the expectations that we have, school has, sports have, maybe there's things going on in the home. These all fall on our children. And they think so often, they internalize if there's abuse or neglect or alcohol or divorce. They internalize this and they think it's their fault. Even my own son has told me that he thought at the time that I was having difficulty with my husband and drinking so much, that it was his fault. We tried to keep it from him, but he knew. Doesn't matter how much you try to keep from them, they know. They're so inquisitive, they can read what is happening. And this is affecting them. And what we need to also remember is that they're human. We need to be human for ourselves and human for our family. Talking about the stressors for ourselves, right? Financial struggles. If we're talking about financial struggles all the time and our kids are hearing this, think about how that would be affecting them, the fear that they would be living in because of that. And then they're scared to ask for anything. Or maybe they're involved with sports and then they feel guilt because they're involved in these sports. They know that you're having these difficulties financially. Grief. We just went through so much with COVID and the loss, and we think it's just affecting us. It is affecting us, but it's affecting our children. And it's so important that you help yourself if this is something that you're going through. So trauma, taking care of your parents, health issues, relationship problems, and work pressures. These are all huge. And now we have the stressors and the responses to those stressors. Now, the first one is so interesting. Criticizing yourself, the negative self-talk. I mean, that comes up all the time. And that's really something that we need to recognize and need to change. But the driving fast in a car. I remember when my kids were younger and I would get angry and I start driving fast. Or somebody makes you mad. Or you're just mad because of life, something that's happened to you. And now you're putting yourself in jeopardy and everyone else. Chewing your fingernails, my husband's big on that one. Becoming aggressive, violent, and that's, that could be slamming doors, hitting walls. Eating too much, eating too little. A lot of kids, a lot of young girls, if they have eating disorders, a lot of times that's because something else is out of control in their life, and that's the only thing that they can control. So, smoking, chewing tobacco, drinking alcohol, doing drugs, misusing prescription medicine. We talk about these things. A child gets hurt, starts on medication, maybe something with ourselves. We start on Ambien because we can't sleep. Now then you think you've got to use Ambien because there's no way you could sleep without your Ambien, and then you're addicted. So these are things that just happen slowly over time, but it's something that we need to focus on and think about. Yelling in the house, it not only affects you, it affects the children, your friends, you're isolating, you're avoiding your family. And so many of these things lead to addiction. So if we're drinking to cope, you may not think it's anything. You drink with your friends, you drink a lot on the weekends maybe. Then it starts being the normal thing, like I talked about, maybe at 5 o'clock, it just gives you that release. But over time, if we have continued use, we have tolerance, so we need more. Then we have cravings for it. Then we become dependent on it. And then we have addiction. And whether it's behavioral or it's a substance, it all stems from the same place, and that's the reward system in our head. We have that dopamine hit when our kids are playing video games. I'm dealing with that right now. My son is 19 years old, and he went into a state of depression at school. And now we are finding out that basically he was losing himself in the world of video games, and he didn't know how to show up in real life. So I realized I was enabling him with these video games. We don't think about it as an addiction, but it's the same thing. So how can we help our teens? And listen, I have teens, but it's also for ourselves, right? How is the stress affecting health, behavior, thoughts, feelings? Listen to your kids, watch their behaviors, how they're being overloaded, how they're responding, if they're changing how they're dressing, if they're isolating in their rooms. These are all things that we need to take notice of because that's not normal behavior. And I really want to encourage you also, one of the things that teens deal with is neglect, like abandonment, but that also shows up as when our kids are trying to talk to us and we are talking at them, we don't allow them to ask us questions. We don't open the door for them to be real with us. Or maybe we're just on our phones. We're looking at our own phones, our own devices, and we're not giving them the time they deserve. So learn and model stress management. Again, what I was talking about. Our children are going to model whatever we do and make sure that they have support really in any area. So positive coping tools. This is big, right? One of the big ones that changed for me was moving from a negative mindset to a gratitude mindset. I used to complain all the time about what I didn't have or what was being done to me, but I never took the time to really look at all of the amazing things that were all around me, right? And it doesn't have to be big things. It's not necessarily your house or your car or the next trip that you have or the diamond earrings you want. These are the little things you think about every single morning when you wake up in the morning. Thank you, higher power or whoever it is that is your divine, your God. Thank you for the sheets I have. Thank you for the blanket. Thank you for the shoes I have when I get out of this bed. Thank you for that cup of coffee that I'm gonna have when I go downstairs. And the more and more you do it, you move into a gratitude mindset, and truly life will begin to change because the energy you put out, negative energy, is what you're getting back. So deep breathing exercises are huge. I know we're like, oh, we all breathe, but there's something huge about deep breathing. It can release the stress. And I'm actually going to do an exercise with you, so I hope you'll join in on that with me so you can feel what it feels like. And also a support system, your family, your friends, Or maybe there's somebody like a therapist, somebody that can help you. Don't think you can do everything on your own. Nobody can do everything on their own. Physical activity. This is huge. And this doesn't have to be doing a boot camp or going to the gym. This could be walks. This could be yoga. These could be little things, stretching, moving your body, releasing those feel-good chemicals, serotonin, endorphins. So important. That positive mindset again. Think about your accomplishments at the end of the day. I mean, how many times do we do something great through the day? We have all these great things. One little thing that happens, one bad thing, and that's the only thing we can think about. So I encourage you, please, think about the positive things that have happened for you in the day. And do this again daily. Set those goals for yourself. Because when we make those short-term goals, we get it down on paper, we can focus, it gives us direction, we don't overwhelm ourselves about what the end goal is, because if we did that, we're sure not gonna start. So just really keep it simple and just one step, one foot in front of the other. Meditation was huge for me. I started doing this daily. It changed my life. And so many people say, I can't meditate. I can't quiet my mind. Well, we're thinking humans. So of course you're going to think, but there's ways that you can do it. You can either sit quietly for like 15 minutes, set an alarm, make sure that you're not thinking about the time, make sure nobody's going to bother you, go in a quiet room, and listen for like the hum. You hear a hum? There's always a sound in the room. And you can always go back. Just let the thoughts float through, but you can always go back to that sound. And the more and more you do it, the better and better you get. And what happens through that is that you'll begin to get impulses. You'll be able to listen to your inner self and be guided to your true mission in this life. Your joy is what you're supposed to be living. We all are. We all have our purpose, and we all have our beautiful gifts that we've been given. And aromatherapy, this is another one. This one's easy. There's so many. I mean, it can perk you up, it can bring you down, help you with sleep. So definitely something to look into. This is this breathing exercise. So I hope you'll all participate. So just sit down, well, you're already sitting. Get comfortable and close your eyes. And this is called the 4-6 breathing technique. So breathe in to the count of 4. Breathe out to the count of 6. Do it again. Breathe in to the count of 4. Breathe out to the count of 6 through your mouth. And you should feel your body starting to relax. If you're doing it right, you should feel that relaxation. And it's also important that you do this when you're meditating. So it says to do it 5 to 10 minutes, but honestly, if you are in a state of feeling really stressed, do it 10 times and it will make a difference for you. Get out and walk for 10 minutes. It will make a difference. You've got to get out of your head when you are in a stressful place. You've got to get that in your body and feel it here so you can move through it. Don't go grab a cigarette or whatever it is. I mean, I don't know if anybody's smoking anymore, but you know what I mean. Like, we have the negative coping mechanisms, but the positive ones. You can find 10 minutes to walk or breathe or meditate for 15 minutes. And when you're in overwhelm, just a few things that you can do. Say to yourself, I can do this another 15 minutes. Take small steps, one step in front of the other. Don't overwhelm yourself with all that you have to do. Put together a to-do list. Be happy with what you accomplished in that day. It's going to be there the next day. Everything that you need to get done is going to get done. Just don't feel like you have to do it all at one time. Take it in small bite-sized pieces. Don't get lost in that overwhelm. And again, you will reach that destination. So we talked some about the morning routine. I mean, these are really important things to start doing for yourself every day. Start your day with intention. Start your day at a peaceful state instead of rolling over, grabbing your phone, listening to the news. I mean, if you can, try not to listen to the news for at least 30 minutes. I mean, it's all negativity, right? Do some positive things for yourself. So I have a whole list here. And listen, if you're not able to do the physical activity in the morning, do it another time during the day. I mean, the wonderful thing is you can also start your day over. So if something goes wrong, just start your day over, all right? And here, for some positive quotes, things to read in the morning, here's 3 great books here, and they really do make a difference for you and a shift for you. Chaos to Clarity. I started my show because I wanted to help and inspire people, because I started building this beautiful life and living this beautiful life that I was guided to do. And then I was guided to write my book, write my story. I've shared with you part of my story, a small part of it. There was a lot of chaos in my life, how that affected me. Then when I came to clarity, a place of peace, and how I got there, how the 12-step program helped me. I literally break things out for you. I have education weaved throughout my book. I mean, I even talk about grooming. 1 in 3 girls will be sexually assaulted. 1 in 5 boys will be sexually assaulted. I mean, think about that. I mean, I'm sure that a lot of us could even tell our own story about that. And I want to say that if you start to tell your story and you move yourself out of shame and the stigma attached to it, you get to start your own healing journey. And that's what I want with my book. I want to meet you where you are with your healing journey. I want you to move forward in this life and know it's possible. I now see beautiful signs from the other side. I share a lot of stories. Dragonflies are a big part of my story because I moved to a new house after I'd gotten sober, and my husband and I started a new life in a new house. And I was sitting in the backyard, and there was a dragonfly that came right in front of me, and I looked up and there were hundreds of dragonflies surrounding me. And it's never happened again. I was in the bathroom at the church. I just gotta share it because it happens all the time. And it happens for all of us. It's just opening your eyes to it. These beautiful signs from our higher power, our higher self, our angels. So I was having a really difficult time a couple of weeks ago with my son and his mental health. My dog, I thought he was gonna have cancer. I was stressed for a lot of reasons, and I was just like, I was in church and I'm like, God, please just give me a sign. I go to the bathroom because I start crying. I'm in the stall. I see something falling down and I pick it up. It's a little white feather, which means someone from the other side. Maybe it was my mom, maybe it was my angels, but just showing that someone was present with me and that I'm not alone. And I just want to let you all know that you are meant to live a beautiful life. And if I can help you do that, my book's a quick read, and I think that you could get a lot from it if you're looking for that. These are also just some resources that I wanted to put together. If anybody is going through anything, it's hard to talk about these things, but there's so much help that is available. So just reach out and talk to someone. And I would love it if you connected with me on social media. Be amazing to have you part of my community. I also give a lot of inspiration through the week, and I have a lot of fun with it, and I just want to really just connect and help people. So I'm really excited to now have Tanvi come up and have a little Q&A. And Tanvi, please come up. I think we have to take, yeah, let me just put my phone down. Yeah, I guess, just because of time. Yeah, you want to close that? Sure. Okay. Just because of time, I'm going to stand it. You know what? We'll sit with you guys. All right.
Perfect. Perfect. I'm not feeling too bright.
Okay. Can I have a little help? Okay, no, got it.
Hi.
So, hello.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
It's so wonderful to have you. And Tanvi was on my show several years ago, and we really connected. And I love the work and the messaging that Tanvi has. And she used to work with teens, and she's done so much. And now she's helping parents and moms and trying to help them to navigate life for themselves. Because it really starts with us. We go through so much ourselves, and we have to wear so many hats, and our community puts a lot of pressure on us. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you. So let's talk about what you're seeing with teenagers and what they're struggling with mostly.
So Marcy hit the nail on the head on everything. Everything she was discussing, these are the things that we're seeing. A lot of it is typical throughout day-to-day life, but what we're seeing is heightened, very extreme situations, and perfectionism and overachievement is a hot topic right now. A lot of times before people come to therapy, about 72 to 75% of parents will take their kids to a specialist because we have to understand that stress and anxiety, which I'll talk about after, manifests physically in our body. And that's our body's way of saying something's happening, pay attention. So most often people will see a GI, these are all teens, GI, dermatologist, which is pretty typical, cardiologist, and neurologist. So the GI, the neurologist, and the cardiologist are the three most common specialists that teens will see. And they all get referred to therapy because after a lot of testing, they will come to terms with understanding that it's their mental health that is being impacted at the time. So perfectionism and overachievement, this is something that kids usually develop at a younger age. Overachievement and perfectionism are both related to meeting standards that are over what we're realistically capable of meeting, right? So things that are out of touch, out of reality, a lot of times somebody who's a perfectionist will often not be satisfied. They will never be happy. They're always thinking about the next step. And the reason why a lot of times they become overachievers and perfectionists is because they're looking for validation. They're always looking for something. Right, so there are 4 areas that we see this in particular with teenagers. With sports and being a good athlete. We see it socially with being accepted and wanting to fit in, being popular. We see it academically, with what's the highest GPA, can I be in the top percent? So these are the things that we tend to see and we have to dissect. But where is it coming from is what we have to look at, and that's what we dive into when these kids start therapy.
Right. So one of the questions I want to ask is the difference between stress and anxiety. This was something that you were sharing with me, that there's a difference.
Yes.
Is this on? Hi.
So
yeah, what is the difference?
So stress and anxiety often can go hand in hand, but it's important for us to understand the difference between the two. Stress is pressure, the feeling that you have to measure up, you have to complete, you have to always make ends meet, right? Whereas anxiety is more of the worry, the fear. What if I can't? Something bad and negative always happening. Stress manifests more in your eyes. You'll experience more headaches. You'll see a lot of people experience knots. Sometimes this is when people go to neurologists because they think something's wrong with them. And anxiety happens more with your gut health, restless leg syndrome, sweating, heart palpitations. And with anxiety, people will often also experience anxiety attacks or panic attacks, which there's also a difference between the two. An anxiety attack is, it's associated with something that you can identify that has been worrying you, and then there's this onset. Panic attacks come out of nowhere. So panic attacks are a little bit more difficult to identify where they come from because they can be a little bit more scarier. Not understanding, if you're walking through your daily life and there's nothing that has been stressing you out or worrying you, and all of a sudden you're feeling this pain and you end up in the hospital and you're told, oh, it's just a panic attack, and you have no reasoning for it.
Yeah, my daughter, she had anxiety, panic attacks, and I wasn't really sure where that came from. But let's talk about the expectations of our kids and our communities and where we live. And I mean, when my daughter was in like 8th grade, people were already like, where are you going to college, right? What do you want to do? I'm like, can we slow down a little bit?
I know, you want to tell them to ST, right? I know.
Yeah, so, I mean, the expectations are really high. Mm-hmm. So what are we doing as parents or caretakers? What are we doing to our kids?
We're exposing them to a whole lot. Now, I'm a mother of 3. My kids are a little younger, 11, 9, and 7. I was just telling Marcy the story about my 11-year-old. I come from a family of overachievers, so everyone goes to Ivy League or like the best colleges, and I was just telling her, one of my nieces, she's a junior and she just got recruited by Harvard, so she's already committed to that. So my son is in 6th grade, just started middle school. In November, he wakes us up, my husband and I, up at 1 o'clock in the morning, crying. He goes, what if I don't get into Princeton? I'm like, what is going on here right now? What if you don't get into Princeton? He's like, yeah, I want to get into Princeton. What if my resume doesn't look good? I didn't even know what a resume was at 11. I was riding my bike up and down the street. Well, these kids have a lot of access to social media. People have a lot of access to our kids, more than we realize, and they're being exposed to a lot. And my husband said, you're going to be fine, go to sleep. I said, whoa, no. We something's going on here. If he can't get a steady sleep, then we need to discuss this. And we had a brief conversation, and then over the next week, we really opened up the line of communication. We can't just tell our kids everything's gonna be fine and put a Band-Aid on it, because we don't know what's going on and we don't wanna explore it. It might be too time consuming. We need to open up that line of communication to get them to understand that they can come to us, because they don't understand what they're thinking and feeling. If your daughter's being posed that question in 8th grade, can you imagine how many people are approaching our kids in social gatherings and asking like, hey, where are you going? What are you gonna do? What do you wanna be when you grow up? I don't know, I didn't know I was gonna be a therapist until I was like 20 years old.
Yeah, and I mean, the conversations we're having in the house too. Like, we just gotta watch, because our words are so powerful.
Yes.
Right, and they're hearing and they're absorbing all of these things.
We are the role models.
Yeah.
We are the role models. So what we project is also what we're gonna attract. We have to be really mindful of the foundation that we set and the tone that's going on in the home. If you are an anxious person and you are a stressed person and you are projecting that in your home environment, guess what? That's what our kids are gonna learn. That's how they're gonna learn how to react. And we don't want our kids to learn how to react, we want them to respond. We want them to have their thoughts organized and be prepared to respond to situations. And the difference between reacting and responding is, reaction is, there's all these little fires, and now we're scrambling to put them out, and it's complete and utter chaos. Whereas when we respond, when things are calm, we're having healthy conversations. Those conversations are consistent. So when that chaos ensues, we don't engage, we don't absorb. Instead, we tackle, we challenge, and we work around, and we become more solution focused instead of problem focused.
I like that. Solution focused. Because there is always a solution.
Oh my God, to everything.
Yeah, so let's talk about how our kids are coping today.
Okay, so not the best, okay? Coping strategies, and these coping strategies have always been around, but in the past 4 years, and especially since COVID has hit, we are seeing a spike. So earlier onset of engaging in sexual activity, we're seeing 6th, 7th graders having sex. Drug use, which has always been around, right? Kids try to dabble, but now they are engaging in drug use to de-stress. I can't tell you how many kids we see who are getting their hands on psychedelics. And now that marijuana is legal, right, they're getting their hands on that a lot easier too. Self-harm, and now self-harm and eating disorders, those are big. It's more when people engage in that when there's a lack of control. Self-harm is more associated with sexual abuse, neglect and abandonment issues, not getting validation, feeling rejected. So that's a key component, trying to gain control when you feel out of control, because you can, and this might be a little bit too much information, but just to give you a little bit of an understanding, you control the pain. You know where you're going, how deep you're going, when to start, when to stop, what your tool is, what your weapon is, right? Eating disorders are also associated with an out of control situation. So we have the typical anorexia, bulimia, the binge eating, but what we're seeing a heightened response to is orthorexia, which is you seem to be eating properly, you seem to be very, very healthy, but you're counting your calories, you're over-exercising, you're over-obsessed with your physical appearance, you eliminate foods from your diet, right? So you will not go above or beyond your calories. It's not that you're eating less or more, you're eating just exact. So that comes hand in hand now with anxiety and OCD. So you see how it creates this web, how this ripple effect comes to be. It starts with one thing, and then when we're not paying attention, the situation creates this wildfire that gets out of control.
One other thing I want to say is that if we are not educating our kids, they're being educated by their peers. So
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times, like, I've tried to explain to my daughter about eating or calories, what's okay, well, so-and-so said this, so they're gonna fill in the blanks, they're gonna get educated, and they're gonna believe their peers, so we've gotta do our best to educate them in each one of these areas. Yeah, definitely. So, now, our teens are coping negatively, but how can we help them now? So is therapy the only way?
No, therapy's not for everybody. My son refuses to go to therapy, but I have a 9.5-year-old daughter who has PTSD from medical trauma. She's had 5 hand surgeries from the age of 4 to 8, and it's caused some neurological damage, so she experiences these uncontrollable muscle spasms that they can't even properly diagnose. So this has interfered with her ability to do a lot of physical activities that she wants to do, and she's the athlete. She wants to do everything and she wants to be perfect. And she was really good at everything she put her hands on and touched. But she can't do gymnastics now. And she always said, I'm gonna be Simone Biles. She wrote a biography on it. So her dreams have kind of been crushed. And my husband kept saying, you're gonna be fine, you're gonna be fine. Again, putting a Band-Aid on it. But she wasn't fine. It was actually getting worse to the point where this kid couldn't stay in school. Every day we were picking her up because her arms would lock up and her hands would lock up and she would be stuck like this for hours. And we had to really work through it. Well, guess what? It was all triggered by anxiety and stress. She has this fear of, I'm different, people are looking at me. And once that thought hits, automatically her body has this physical response. So we had to really create this framework. As parents, we create the framework and we allow them to communicate with them. With that framework comes this foundation. That foundation is the values that we set. Right? So how we allow our kids to come to us and approach us is going to make the biggest difference in the world. Okay? It's going to set the tone. If you tell your kids not to worry about anything, it's going to be okay. But don't allow them to discuss or have a dialogue with you about how things are going to be okay. You're just leaving them hanging. So even with my daughter, she said we allowed her to communicate with us, and she said, I don't want to go to these doctors anymore. And we thought, well, no, you have to go to these doctors. We need a diagnosis. Well, you know what? Everything showed that she's technically okay, and it's going to take time. And then she said, Mom, can I go to somebody who does what you do? So we started her in therapy almost a year ago with a great practice, and she loves it. She has made so much progress. But my son, no way. He doesn't want to do it. He won't even try it.
Right. Well, sometimes kids, do they think, well, then I'm broken if I have to go to therapy, right? But, I don't think people realize how much therapy helps. Like, to be able to talk about it and be given ways that we can reshape the way that we think, right? And how important that is. So I've always thought and say that it starts with our own as parents, like our own trauma, our own brokenness, right? And then now we're pushing that on to our children. So how can we help ourselves first?
So, when you talked about self-care and putting the oxygen mask on first, because then you can take better care, that's what we need to do. Managing our self-care. So self-care is not just going to the gym and working out, or going for your walk outdoors for an hour, or going for a social gathering. Self-care is actually something that we need to practice every day throughout the day. In the morning when you wake up, you need to ask yourself, did I get enough sleep? How am I feeling? How am I feeling today? What are my thoughts? What type of day am I going to have? Do I need to go easy on myself? And the more you practice self-care, the more you're going to be aware and connected to yourself. And it's going to allow you to reflect on the things that you've been through. Because now you're showing this openness to take care of yourself. And when we take care of ourselves, we're more willing. Right? So that self-talk in the mirror, that's key. It's important. Having conversations. When you approach your children, or when you're responding to your children, you need to ask yourself, would I want to be spoken to this way? And if I don't, then why am I doing it? What's creating it, right? So again, we want to create a ripple effect in the thoughts, and we want to work backwards. So it's kind of like we're driving down this long highway, right? It's an empty highway, and when we're aiming for our goal, whatever it is that's your dreams, your goals out on the horizon, we're aiming for that. But in order to get there, we also have to take a look back and see how far we've come, and do I still need to repair anything, right? We're like a car. We can't carry a load of passengers and expect to take everybody to their destination and help them meet their goals if we're not maintaining. If we don't change our tires, we're not putting fuel in, we're gonna break down. And we're gonna be stranded, and guess what those passengers are gonna, they've preserved their energy, they're gonna get out and they're gonna keep walking and get to where they need to be, and you're gonna be like, what about me? So having that daily self-talk and reflecting on our time, and sometimes when we don't have time, I say, give yourself 30 minutes. 30 minutes a day. So we want to compartmentalize our thoughts. And during that 30 minutes, it's structured time, and you sit there and you stress and you worry the crap out of yourself. Whatever it is that's bothering you, fear, am I sick? Am I going to get better? Am I a good enough parent? Am I going to be successful? And then when that 30 minutes is up, you get up and you start working towards your goals. But you only give yourself 30 minutes.
Well, then I hope you will go on YouTube and do a guided meditation and help yourself. Because you're gonna need to relax after that one.
Well, that's why I say don't do it before bed. Never do it before bedtime.
So I think we should open it up to questions. It's about 8:15 now. So does anyone have any questions for myself or for Tanvi? Anyone? Is it anyone feeling overwhelming stress themselves?
So can autoimmune things be caused by the constant load of stress? Like I have a niece who has Crohn's, but she's probably a perfectionist and had a way of looking at people around her. Is that what brought it on? It's possible, right?
So, can I answer? I have ulcerative colitis, which is a sister disease. Yeah, it is. They say it's hereditary, but the initial trigger is usually stress-induced. So mine was induced when I was 6 months pregnant with my first child, and it sounds so ridiculous, but I was matron of honor in a wedding, and it was Brightzilla, and she stressed me out to the point where there was like no return, and ultimately it impacted my pregnancy and myself, and put myself and my child down harm. But yes, they say it is a stress-induced disease.
And psoriasis too, psoriasis, because
yes.
it's the same medication for ulcerative colitis and psoriasis. I was talking to the dermatologist down the street today, and she says, yes, but it's different inflammation pathways, but it all comes from the same basis. So you get a person who's really anxious and nervous, they could have psoriasis.
Yes.
Or there's all sorts of things that they can get. Autoimmune is about not hating yourself. I mean, your autoimmune system is there to protect you. But if it's too active, it starts attacking you.
Yeah.
And that's what autoimmune is. So it's a sort of kind of self-hating. You hate yourself and you start attacking your own body. You know?
Well, that happens absolutely. And Tanvi was telling us about your body breaking down. And stress generally will induce so many things that are going on with your body. So one thing that I wanted to say, I know it's getting late, people are having to start to leave and stuff. I do have my book here if anyone is interested. For $15, I'd love to sign it and meet you. But also, if you are uncomfortable asking questions in front of people, I know a lot of times it's that way. Please reach out to me. I'm at wakeupwithmarcy.com or wakeupwithmarcy@gmail.com. I'm happy to connect with anybody. Tanvi, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, at emergecounseling@gmail.com or emergecounselingnj.com. I have some cards if anybody's interested.
And Emerge Counseling's in Ridgewood, so she's close. But these are all things that are so important, and we really need to start thinking of ourselves and our mental health, and it's time. Self-care is so important. So,
Yeah.
Tanvi, thank you so much, and
Thank
thank
you
you
for
all so
having
much
me.
for letting me be a part of this evening.